In an extraordinary turn of events, President Trump's push to acquire Greenland has escalated dramatically, prompting emergency meetings among European leaders as they formulate a response to a new U.S. tariff threat. The situation intensified following the revelation of a letter from President Trump to Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre. The letter, Nobel Prize cited as justification. In the letter, President Trump expressed his displeasure over not receiving the Nobel Peace Prize, writing, "Considering your country decided not to give me the Nobel Peace Prize for having stopped 8 wars, plus I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace. I can now think about what is good and proper for the United States of America." A Norwegian diplomat confirmed the letter's authenticity, and the Prime Minister's office acknowledged receiving it. The tone as a fit of pique, linking the Nobel Prize grievance directly to the aggressive stance on Greenland and tariffs. European reaction, retaliation, and ratcheting tensions. The tariff threat has effectively derailed a major trade deal between the U.S. and the European Union, signed last summer to avert a trade war. European lawmakers are now refusing to ratify the agreement, which set U.S. tariffs at 15% and prevented EU retaliatory levies. Consequently, previously frozen EU counter-tariffs, worth $93 billion, are now set to take effect in February. While European Commission officials publicly call for de-escalation, compromise, and dialogue, they are simultaneously preparing forceful retaliatory measures. These could escalate to the bazooka option, the EU's anti-coercion instrument, which would severely restrict U.S. access to European markets. Military and geopolitical analysis. Retired Major General James Spider Marks, a geopolitical strategist, assessed that while enhancing the U.S. relationship with Greenland has strategic merit, the administration's approach is deeply problematic. He emphasized that military action to acquire Greenland is unlikely and would be catastrophic for NATO, potentially causing the alliance to atrophy. "The United States is not going to use military power to embrace Greenland," Marks stated. He pointed to existing U.S.-RS Greenland defense agreements dating to 1951 and suggested alternatives like a purchase, evoking the 1867 acquisition of Alaska, or supporting Greenland AUI's potential path to independence, similar to Iceland's in 1944. However, he warned that even provocative rhetoric risks harming critical alliances. Global fallout and the view from Davos. The crisis is dominating discussions at the World Economic Forum in Davos. European leaders feel trapped, forced to retaliate against unprecedented U.S. actions despite a desire to avoid a full-scale trade war. The stance of senior U.S. officials like Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who declared that Europeans project weakness and the U.S. projects strength, indicates the policy has broad administration support. This, combined with domestic political pressure in the U.S., makes de-escalation challenging. "The train is leaving the station," Quest noted. "The president has shoved everything on board. It is going to be very difficult to stop an all-out trade war because the Europeans will not be seen to be weak on this issue." Prime Minister Starmer condemns U.S. tariff threats, reaffirms alliance principles. British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer held a press conference today, directly addressing the escalating transatlantic crisis following President Trump's threats to impose tariffs on the UK and NATO allies over the issue of Greenland. Starmer's core message: strength through respectful partnership. In a firm but diplomatic tone, Starmer outlined the UK's position, value of the alliance. He stressed the profound importance of the UK-US relationship to security and prosperity, citing hundreds of billions of pounds in U.S. investment and close defense and intelligence cooperation. How to manage disagreements. Mature alliances are not about pretending differences don't exist. They are about addressing them directly, respectfully, and with a focus on results, he stated. On Greenland's future, he was unequivocal. "Any decision about the future status of Greenland belongs to the people of Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark alone. That right is fundamental, and we support it." He framed the security of the Arctic as a collective NATO issue requiring cooperation, not coercion. Condemnation of tariffs. Starmer explicitly called the use of tariffs against allies completely wrong, asserting that alliances endure because they're built on respect and partnership, not pressure. Analysis. A pragmatic stance facing a volatile crisis. While strong on principle, Starmer's approach appeared cautious on immediate retaliation. He emphasized daily contact with the Trump administration and a focus on dialogue, notably avoiding specific threats of UK counter-tariffs during questioning. This positions the UK differently from the EU, which is preparing a $93 billion retaliatory package. Expert insight: a crisis without a clear deal. Speaking from the World Economic Forum in Davos, Josh Lipsky of the Atlantic Council highlighted the unique severity of the situation. An unprecedented dispute. Lipsky noted this is a disagreement unlike any we've seen, because the U.S. demand, the acquisition of Greenland, is a non-starter for Europe, leaving little room for a traditional negotiation. Legal uncertainty. The impending Supreme Court ruling on the legality of President Trump's Liberation Day tariff authority adds a layer of volatility. A ruling against the president could destabilize his primary economic leverage as the crisis unfolds. Starmer's potential role. Lipsky observed that Starmer appeared to be positioning the UK as a potential mediator between the US and EU. However, he noted a sense of uncertainty about what a viable deal could entail and questioned whether President Trump would accept such mediation. Senator Gallego lambasts Trump's Greenland push as reckless and self-serving. In a stark condemnation, Senator Ruben Gallego, DAZ, characterized President Trump's campaign to acquire Greenland as a dangerously irrational pursuit driven by ego, warning it is undermining America's alliances and economic interests. Gallego's assessment: no reasoning and a costly legacy quest. Following meetings with Danish and Greenlandic officials, Gallego reported they were shocked and searching for logic in the U.S. threats. He asserted none exists. A personal legacy project. The senator accused the president of seeking a legacy piece, a large territory on a map, regardless of the diplomatic and economic cost. He's willing to ruin our whole foreign policy, all of our alliances, our economy, just so he could get what he wants. This man is doing everything for himself and nothing for us, Gallego stated. How? A fiscal irresponsibility. He highlighted the absurdity of discussing a potential $500 billion land purchase while the U.S. struggles to afford health care for its citizens. Gallego noted that Denmark has offered expanded basing rights, making the push for outright possession a dumbest decision. A pattern of failure. Gallego sarcastically linked the strategy to Trump's business history, remarking, "The only way we can make a decision this dumb is someone would actually let a casino go under. And guess who's president right now?" White House perspective: an emboldened president. Analysts note, the president feels newly empowered following the Venezuela operation. The desire for Greenland, a fixation since his first term, is now being pursued with fewer internal restraints. The administration frames it as a legacy national security issue, citing Arctic competition with China and Russia and access to critical minerals. Mounting domestic opposition. The push faces significant headwinds at home. Public opinion. An overwhelming opposition, with 82% of independents and nearly half of Republicans against the U.S. taking control of Greenland. Republican dissent: Senators Tom Tillis, RNC, and Lisa Murkowski, RAK, have publicly criticized the tariff threats and the notion of seizing an ally's territory. Tillis called the idea beyond stupid, while Murkowski labeled it a profound mistake. Legislative leverage? Questions remain about whether congressional Republicans, despite their discomfort, would take concrete steps, such as invoking war powers or challenging tariff authority, to restrain the president. Pence's nuanced Republican critique. Former Vice President Mike Pence offered a more measured Republican perspective. While affirming the strategic value of U.S. interests in Greenland and the Arctic, he expressed concern over the methods. "I have concerns about using what I think is a questionable constitutional authority, imposing unilateral tariffs on NATO allies to achieve this objective," Pence said. He advocated for diplomacy and investment over coercion, stating he would prefer the president use persuasive powers to lay a foundation for the goal. A deepening rift: President Trump's Greenland ambition has escalated from a geopolitical oddity into a full-blown transatlantic crisis, exposing rifts within the GOP and between the U.S. and its closest allies. While the administration sees a strategic legacy play, critics like Senator Gallego see a reckless, self-serving gamble that threatens to inflict lasting damage on America's global standing and alliances. The coming days will test whether congressional Republicans move from criticism to action, and if European retaliation forces a recalculation. What you think about that? Give us your feedback and comment. Thanks for watching.